The glass elevator at Redwood Technologies rose 88 floors above San Francisco's financial district, offering a panoramic view of the bay that would have been breathtaking if I weren't too busy trying not to throw up. My stomach churned as I adjusted my Brooks Brothers suit, a welcome to the real-world gift from my mother that cost more than my monthly rent. First day jitters? The security guard smiled sympathetically as he checked my temporary ID. Don't worry, Ms. William, everyone feels it their first time up if he only knew. This wasn't just first-day anxiety. In less than 25 minutes, I was about to torpedo my father's legacy and possibly destroy one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious tech companies, and I was pretty sure I was going to get arrested for it. My name is Evelyn William, and 10 hours ago I discovered that my recently deceased father, Benjamin William, founder and CEO of Redwood Technologies, had left me 52% of the company's voting shares. The same father who'd spent the last 7 years refusing to speak to me after I dropped out of Stanford's computer science program to start my own AI security consultancy. The inheritance came with a letter delivered by his personal attorney at 3 a.m. this morning. Dear Evelyn, it began in Dad's precise handwriting. If you're reading this, 2 things have happened. I'm dead, and the board has voted to accept the Meditech acquisition offer. One of these things was inevitable, the other will destroy everything we've built. You're the only one who can stop it. The letter went on to detail his suspicions about Meditech's true intentions for Redwood's revolutionary quantum encryption technology. Dad believed they planned to backdoor the encryption protocols and sell access to the highest bidder, governments, corporations, anyone willing to pay for the ability to break unbreakable encryption. The evidence is in the source code, his letter explained, but they've hidden it well. You'll need both your security expertise and your birthright to expose the truth. The board meets at 9 a.m. to finalize the acquisition. Don't let them sign those papers, Emmy. He'd signed it. Love, Dad. The first time he'd expressed that sentiment since our falling out. Leave it to my father to wait until he was dead, to finally show some emotional vulnerability. The elevator dinged, snapping me back to the present. The top floor of Redwood Technologies was exactly as I remembered it from childhood visits, all gleaming glass and polished mahogany, with Dad's collection of vintage computing artifacts displayed in museum-quality cases along the walls. An original Apple one here, a piece of ENIAC there, the history of computing, carefully curated and climate-controlled. Evelyn, a familiar voice made me turn. Sarah Chun, Dad's longtime executive assistant, hurried toward me. Her eyes were red-rimmed behind her designer glasses. I'm so sorry about your father. We all miss him terribly. She hesitated. The board, they weren't expecting you, I know. I tried to smile reassuringly, but as the majority shareholder, I have some concerns about the Meditech acquisition that need to be addressed. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, so the board hadn't known about the shares. Interesting, of course, she said smoothly, professional mask back in place. They're in the main conference room. Shall I announce you? No need. I squared my shoulders and headed for the double doors, channeling every ounce of confidence I'd learned pitching my own startup to skeptical venture capitalists. I think I can handle this part myself. The Redwood Technologies board of directors consisted of 12 of Silicon Valley's most powerful players. All of them looked up in surprise as I pushed open the doors. Several faces showed recognition, followed quickly by confusion or dismay. They remembered me as Ben Williams' rebellious daughter, the family disappointment who'd walked away from the carefully planned future he'd laid out for me. Marcus Chen, the interim CEO and my father's longtime friend, recovered first. Evelyn, this is unexpected. We're actually in the middle of a rather important vote. The Meditech acquisition. I know. I strode to the head of the table, my father's old spot, and placed my documents on the polished surface, and as the majority shareholder of Redwood Technologies, I'm here to vote no. The room erupted in chaos. Several board members started shouting at once. Marcus's face went pale, and in the corner, David Harrison, Meditech's CEO, slowly stood up, his expression darkening. This is ridiculous, Harrison snapped. Ben Williams' shares were distributed among the board after his death. The vote has already been. Actually, I cut in, sliding copies of the inheritance documents across the table. My father transferred 51% of his voting shares to me 3 days before his death. The transfer was properly registered with the SEC. You can verify with our corporate counsel. I nodded toward Janet Martinez, the company's chief legal officer, who was already flipping through the papers with a growing look of concern. She's right, Janet confirmed after a moment. The transfer appears legitimate. Evelyn has controlling interest in Redwood Technologies. Harrison slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. You can't just walk in here and I can and I am. I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the room's display system. But don't worry, mister. Harrison, I have an even better reason to stop this acquisition than my inheritance rights. Would anyone like to see what I found when I analyzed Meditech's integration code? For the next 30 minutes, I walked the board through my discoveries, the hidden backdoors in Meditech's encryption implementation, the carefully obscured connections to shell companies linked to foreign intelligence services, the evidence that they'd already sold access to similar backdoors in their other acquired companies' security products. This isn't just about corporate espionage, I concluded. This is about national security, and I've already sent copies of my analysis to the FBI's Cybercrime Division and the National Security Agency. Harrison was on his feet again, rage contorting his features. You little bye, choose your next words very carefully, Marcus interrupted, his own expression thunderous. Security is on their way up, and I believe I hear the FBI arriving now. He turned to me, eyes filled with something that looked like pride. Your father knew, didn't he? That's why he gave you the shares. I nodded. He suspected, but he needed someone with both the technical skills to prove it and the legal authority to stop it. Hence the inheritance, always 3 moves ahead. Ben was, Marcus murmured. Then he straightened. I moved to immediately terminate all acquisition discussions with Meditech and launch a full security audit of all our systems. The vote was unanimous, except for Harrison, who was already being escorted out by federal agents. Hours later, after the press statements and preliminary FBI interviews, I found myself alone in my office, staring out at the San Francisco skyline as the sun set behind the Golden Gate Bridge. Sarah appeared with a cup of coffee and a sympathetic smile. The board would like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss the company's direction, she said, and about 24 reporters are camping out in the lobby for interviews. I groaned. I didn't think this through very well, did I? I was so focused on stopping Meditech that I didn't consider what comes next. Actually, Sarah said carefully, I think you did exactly what Ben knew would do. He left something else for you. She reached into her desk and pulled out a sealed envelope. He asked me to give you this if you manage to stop the acquisition. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just a few lines of my father's handwriting. Emmy, I was wrong 5 years ago. You saw something I didn't. That sometimes the best way to protect what we build is to be willing to tear down the old ways of doing things. Redwood needs that perspective now more than ever. The company is yours if you want it, but this time build it your way. Love always, Dad. I looked up at Sarah, blinking back tears. I don't suppose you know any good executive recruiters. I think Redwood Technologies might be in the market for a new chief security officer. She smiled. I think we might already have found one. Part 2, the reconstruction. The first 6 months as Redwood Technologies chief security officer and majority shareholder were a crash course in corporate politics, crisis management, and the delicate art of reforming a company culture without breaking what already worked. The press dubbed me the Security Princess, a nickname I hated but my PR team insisted played well with profiles of young female tech executives. The Meditech scandal had shaken confidence in the entire tech industry's approach to security and privacy. Our stock took an initial hit, but my decision to make Redwood's protocols open source and subject to public audit gradually rebuilt trust. It also drove our competitors crazy, which I considered a nice bonus. More challenging was navigating the complex relationships within Redwood itself. Many of the old guard viewed me with suspicion, the prodigal daughter who'd rejected their world only to return and append it. Others saw an opportunity to advance their own agendas, assuming I'd be easy to manipulate. They all underestimated how much I'd learned running my own company for 5 years. More importantly, they underestimated how much I'd learned from watching my father's successes and failures. The board's concerned about the pace of changes, Marcus told me. One evening, after yet another contentious meeting, we were sharing takeout Chinese food in my office, a habit we'd developed during late strategy sessions, particularly the new ethical AI guidelines and the diversity initiatives. I picked up my Kung Pao chicken, the same board that nearly let Meditech compromise our entire security infrastructure. That board, they're trying. Evelyn. Change is hard for people who've done things the same way for decades. He paused. Your father struggled with change too, but he always tried to do what was right. Once he understood what that was, I know, I sighed. That's why I'm not firing the entire board, tempting as it might be. We need their experience and institutional knowledge. We just need to combine it with new perspectives. Marcus nodded approvingly. Speaking of new perspectives, what do you think about Jennifer Martinez? For the board, Janet's daughter, the environmental engineer, I remembered meeting her at company events years ago, brilliant, passionate about sustainable technology and completely uninterested in following her mother into corporate law. She's been doing amazing work on green data center design. If we're serious about reducing our carbon footprint, we could use her expertise, he grinned, plus. It might help smooth things over with Janet, who's still a bit miffed about not knowing about your inheritance. Add her to the list of candidates. I pulled up a spreadsheet on my tablet, along with Dr. Chen from Berkeley's AI ethics department and that amazing security researcher who keeps finding bugs in our bug bounty program. Ah yes, the famous Bite Wolf who's cost us nearly $1 million in bounty payments, Marcus chuckled. You know the board will have fits about putting a hacker on the board of directors, good. A few fits might do them good. I closed the tablet and leaned back in my chair, my father's chair, though I'd redecorated the office in my own style. We're not just rebuilding from the Meditech crisis, Marcus, we're rebuilding for the future. That means new voices, new perspectives, and yes, some disruption of the old ways. He studied me thoughtfully. You sound more and more like Ben every day, but also entirely like yourself. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. He stood, gathering the empty takeout containers. Oh, by the way, Sarah mentioned you're speaking at Stanford next week, guest lecture for the computer science department. I smiled wryly, apparently dropping out to start a successful company and then inheriting a Fortune 600 company makes for an interesting career path discussion, planning to encourage more dropouts, planning to encourage them to think for themselves and follow their convictions, even when it means disappointing people they respect. I glanced at the photo of my father I kept on my desk sometimes. Especially then, the Stanford lecture went better than expected, though the QA session ran long with students eager to discuss everything from ethical AI development to work-life balance in tech leadership. One quiet student lingered after the others left, clutching her laptop nervously. Ms. William, I wanted to show you something. She opened her laptop, revealing dense lines of code. I think I found a potential security vulnerability in Redwood's new quantum encryption implementation. I pulled up a chair next to her. Walk me through it. For the next hour, she demonstrated an incredibly clever attack factor that none of our security teams had considered. By the time she finished, I had already emailed our head of security and was reaching for my business card. We have a summer internship program, I told her, but in your case, I'd like to discuss something more permanent after graduation. Have you considered a career in security research? Her eyes widened. My parents want me to go into management consulting. They say tech is too unstable, especially with all the recent scandals. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, comment, subscribe, and share.